reading on the cut that way, so I thought I'd do something on D-Day. I've run through this before in some of the various talks I've had, particularly on the development of radar. And this is basically on how radar affected everything. A lot of flying around here. Starting off, just about everyone knows that we had a fake army sitting in the southeast corner of England. The rubber tanks, trucks, guns, all sorts of stuff, put a few of them up here just to let you see what it looked like. And they were put together by a guy called, it's a weird name actually, Jasper Maskelyne. He'd been used before. He was a set designer in the British industry for movies and so on, and they'd used them in the Panama Canal area during the North African campaign. One of the big targets there, of course, was the Suez Canal, which is about 7 or 8 miles long, and it was one of the prime targets for the Luftwaffe. Luftwaffe only bombed at night. They were too vulnerable in the daytime with the restricted area and so many fighter aircraft sitting on the ground there. So they would try and bomb at night. And what he developed was basically strobe lights, and they had these lit up at night, so they dazzled the whole area, and it was impossible to pick the canal out, and no bombs were ever dropped on it. So he was a natural man to go to when they wanted all these artificial tanks, guns, and everything. The whole area was sort of saturated with tents, square miles of this sort of stuff lying around south of England. They set up a fictitious army, the first army. Patton was going to be in charge of that, and they constructed all sorts of radio traffic, as would be normal in an army of that size, getting ready for an invasion. So that was the sort of background to leading up to the D-Day, and also what we did as a follow-up to that. And it starts off, I'll run a few slides here, you can see what we're at. This I've used before, and I had 2 of these flights, 2 squadron aircraft, 218 Squadron, which were Stirlings, and 617 Squadron, which were Lancasters. 617 Squadron, of course, was the squadron that did the Mon and Ader dams, and they were used for all sorts of specialized bombing tactics during the war. The Stirlings belonged to 218 Squadron, and they were on the what we call 4 group. As the Royal Air Force was split up into Bomber Command, Fighter Command, Coastal Command, and so on. And each command had underneath it what we call groups. Now, a group in the RAF was the same size as a wing in the American Air Force at that time. So they were split up, and 4 group was the one I was in up in Scotland, but 100 group was the special operations types, and they had all types of different aircraft. They had B-17s, using that for mandrel, for jamming. They had B-24s, we had B-25s, and we had a single-engine aircraft, Lysanders. We had a whole slew of these things, all specialized in certain particular things. And the crews flying these were a little bit above the normal run-of-the-mill bomber command crews. So they'd been well-trained, highly specialized in various fields. Basically what we wanted was to create a force. The Germans, and we were monitoring their radio transmissions all the time. In fact, in the 2 sets, the Enigma machine was the big keynote, and Ultra was the top-of-the-line security. And that was only used by about 5 or 6 people, including Churchill, so it was pretty high stuff. And they were actually reading the German orders going to the field marshals in the field before they were getting them. And Patton, of course, was not too happy with spooks to begin with, but when they told him his headquarters were going to be bombed, and it was, then he became a believer. And he was one of the top men that was getting that information. And when he was sweeping through Europe, he already knew where the Germans were going to be and where they were moving before they even got the orders themselves. So he swept through all the way through to, as we well know, through Europe. Now, several things are going to be required here, and I'm going to be jumping around quite a bit with it. The need for this was in navigation, you have three things you need: distance, speed, and time. And the critical one, of course, is time. And going back in time, we had the longitude. This is the guy who invented the chronometer. This is going back to 1740. In those days, sailing around the world was a bit of a hit and miss thing, because once you left the side of land, you were pretty much on your own, and finding out exactly where you are as you sailed around, and knowing the longitude, which is essential to know where you are. The latitude you can always get with a sunshot and the sun's due south at midday every day. So you need the bit how far up and down from the equator you are. So he was the man that designed the clock. And if you ever go to London, go down to the Greenwich Observatory. This was the first chronometer. Very, very accurate indeed. And they still have the original one there. He was awarded £20,000, which in today's money is probably about $7 million. This was one of the watches that he made, and it's quite a large thing indeed. Now, by the time the war was going on, we just had ordinary watches. They were not battery powered or anything sophisticated like that. We didn't get chronometers in the RAF as navigators until after the war, and even during the war we had to notify and practice winding your watch every time, at the same time every day, so you got a pretty good regulation of how accurate it was. And of course, some of the operation were going to be down to seconds. Now, radar played a major part in this operation, and the man who invented it was this Scotsman here, Robert Watson Wyatt. And he was the one that approached the Air Ministry back in 1935 that he could pick up, he could pick up aircraft at a range of about 100 miles on radar and be able to plot them. So he was given some money, and I went ahead and produced an equipment that would do that. And that was the keynote that saved our butts in the Battle of Britain. A very effective thing. So that was the start of radar. Coming right along, that's the Magnetometer, and I think it's down at Montsey on the East Coast where the first radar station was put up. This one here, Dippy, he was very critical indeed, because he was the man that came along in 1936, and he invented the hyperbolic navigational aids, which became known later on as G, but the first one, of course, was Loran. This came out in 36, and it was used by just about everybody navigating around in the Atlantic Ocean. Basically, there's another chart you'll see later on, but basically what it did, you master station and three slaves, and the master triggered off the others, and you could pick them up on a receiver and the aircraft. And this is the actual radar equipment that was used at that time for navigation. Very effective indeed, but not particularly accurate at range. Going on from there, the next thing we came up with was the magnetron valve. Two guys, John Randall and Harry Boot. This came out in 1940 during the war. And if you want to know what a magnetron valve looks like, you can dismantle your microwave oven, and that's what's inside it and does all the cooking for you. If you remember when microwave ovens came out, they were known as the Amana radar range. So that was the heritage from it. It all started with these two guys here. And that gave us the centimetric radar equipment, which gave us high definition then on our radars and all the various types that came from it. Going on from there, we had G, and this came into use in 1942, and by March 42, and about 6 months later, the Germans were able to jam it. They had shot one of our Wellingtons down that were testing it, and of course they got all the kits, the nuts and bolts and how it all worked, and after that. It's a very simple setup. As a navigator, we have two timelines go straight across the top there, and the various pulses pop up and down, and they travel back and forward across the screen. With these controls, this big round one at the bottom here is the course control, then you fine-tune it with another one further down. You can't quite see in that shot, but that's how we navigated with that. And the G station was very good for up to about 300 miles range. Beyond that, your signals are getting a bit weak, but you could still get it all the way to the Kiel Canal area in northern Germany. With G, a slide in here. Here we are. That's the G station set up there. It looks a little bit complex, but basically what you have is your master station transmits, and there's 3 slave stations, and they all receive the signal from the master station. They automatically transmit. And in the aircraft, we would receive that on our screen, and we could plot that on a chart. And we had B, C, and D, blood red, C, green, and deep purple of the 3 stations. That was the sort of simple way of remembering them. And the H station was the master station. It appeared in both the top and bottom trace. And so with that, we were able to navigate pretty damn accurately. The next innovation from the next step up from that with radar was the oval. Some of you have heard me talk about oval once before. This is just 2 stations. You have a master station. It's difficult to see in this particular slide, but you have the master station down here, and it sends a curved signal out, and the aircraft will fly down that curve. This mouse station down here is a straight beam, and he takes over, and as the aircraft approaches the target, he can then drop the bombs very accurately. From 30,000 feet, the maximum arrow is about 100 yards. That's pretty damn good in those days. The trouble was you could only use 1 aircraft at a time. So the next logical step was to combine this with G. And that's exactly what they did. Here you could only use 1 aircraft every 3 minutes. So we've reversed everything. We made the receiver and the aircraft trigger the master station in England, and that way a gazillion aircraft could all use the aircraft at the stations at the same time. So now we have a very great accuracy for any type of navigation, particularly as it's over our own bases. These aircraft are going to be flying over to Calais and Boulogne. So now we have all the elements we needed to get the concentration and the accuracy because of all this stuff that had gone on before and how they all tied together. Now, jamming, this little lady here, Joan Curran, she was a Welsh lady, born in 1916, so in 1940, her father was an optician. She was very good with her fingers, dexterity and stuff that he had used, so she graduated from her college in Wales and then finished up at Cavendish College at Cambridge. And Cavendish was pretty much an intellectual bunch there. The individual running it was tied in with the government quite a bit. And of course, when the war started, the group that had formed of students at that particular college at Cambridge were all put together under the control of the Air Ministry. And the man in charge of intelligence was R.V. Reeves, R-E-E-V-E-S. He was also a physicist, I can figure that out. I might have to take a glass of water here in a minute. Anyway, he got a hold of this team, and they already knew about radar through Watson Wyatt and his, I think there's a slide on here, I'll just look to it, yeah. Sorry. These were the original radar stations that we had in England, and the first one was up here, the northern one there. That's the one where that plaque happens to be. Anyway, that was the start of it all. She informed the group, and the R.V. Reeves, his theory was that with radar, you could jam the German radar, but you could do it one of 2 ways. You could do it by having a jammer that would transmit frequency, but then it gets pretty damn big, and you need a big aircraft, and then the aircraft doing the jamming is vulnerable to being homed on itself. So the other one is by reflection, and that was the path that he decided to follow, and he got this young lady, Joan Reeves, involved in it. Now, when she was at Cambridge, she fell in love with a guy, Sam Curran, and they did get married. And he was a physicist, and they did get married, and he was moved in 1944 to America to work on the atomic bomb. He invented a gadget which is still in use today. It's a long name, which I won't even try and remember it. But it worked very, very well indeed. Anyway, that was him. She stayed in England and then was working on this reflectivity. And there's several ways you can do that. We knew the frequency of all the German radars by this time, and there were two we were concerned with, CTAC, and we retained one of those sets when the Graf Spee was captured down in Montevideo and down in South America, and it got sunk there, and we managed to get the radar, which was a bit of an eye-opener because they were quite a bit ahead of us at that point in time. So that was the one, but we knew the frequency that it worked on. The other one was the Freya, and F-R-E-Y-A, which known about these. There were three of them located before the war in Germany, in the northern coast of Germany, and we didn't know that much about them. And then it's rather interesting, actually. Freya, oddly enough, one of these top scientists at the Air Ministry, remembered the name from the Swedish goddess, and she had so much money in gold and trinkets and so on, and she had this mythical character who could see in all directions, and that was the name of the character Freya. So the Germans made the mistake of putting that on the name of their radar set. So it's one thing that the Brits never did after that. We gave them all sorts of weird names and make sure they couldn't sort of solve what we were doing by the name of the equipment. So anyway, the Freyas were very good. They were good for up to about 100-mile range. We were incredibly lucky in the North African campaign. We captured one completely, brought it back to England. In the meantime, John had been working on another way of doing it. Now, one of the theories was we could use metal, and if you cut the metal to half the wavelength of the frequency that you're going to jam, you can do that. And the thought of using metal, at that time the wavelengths were about 100 meters in some of them, so that when they go down to the 50 centimeter range, that's only 25 centimeters long, so it's about yay big. I went into the Michael's over at the mall the other day, trying to find some tinsel, which is basically the same stuff that you throw in a Christmas tree. And that was used, so Joan was the one that developed that side of it. And by 1942, they had that working surprisingly well. They tested it against our own night fighter aircraft, and Fighter Command had a conniption fit because it just blocked out the navigator's radar screen completely. So they put a hold on that, so they didn't want it being dropped over Germany at that time. And it wasn't until we had a sufficient sort of confidence that we could handle any night raids over Britain using our own radar against German attackers that they got the green light to go ahead. And of course the first time we used it was in July 43 on the first night raid on Hamburg. And that was a highly successful raid. I'm sort of moving around a bit on this, but it'll all come together, believe me, it does. So anyway, that was a highly successful raid. We set the city on fire. The 8th Air Force went in the daytime. They did 4 attacks on it, and it burned for 4 days and killed 40,000 people. So Windsor was an incredibly good success. That gave rise to coming back to what we were doing here. Now, having got everything stirred up with the Germans that we had this fictitious army down the southeast coast of England, and D-Day planning was coming along very, very well indeed. The development then, the tactics to be able to come up with what we have up on the screen here. What we're going to do here, the Germans believed that the main attack would come across the Calais-Dover strip of water in the English Channel. It's the shortest distance, only about 22 miles. And they always felt that that would be the easiest one for us to attack. Unfortunately for them, the planning was all about Normandy. However, having had that fictitious army running city on the coast there, it became logical that somebody decided that that would be the ideal way to do it. And this is what happened. The window that Joan designed was 6 feet long. Normally the window we dropped from bombers, the strips were about that long, and the packet weighed about a pound, and you just pulled it down through the flare chute, and as soon as it hit the atmosphere, it got out in the slipstream, it ballooned out, and there was a whole cloud. So one aircraft would look like several hundred aircraft, and all the bombers behind you got the benefit of them. You were at the front, that was tough, but the rest of the guys got the benefit of all the wind that you were dropping. So this was the concept that she came up with. Now, knowing the width of the bands of the German radar, and jump back and forward in this one. Sorry. This one here. You've got to look at this thing in a very broad outlook, because the number of people involved in this run into the thousands. Because first of all, you've got the air crew. They have to be trained to fly a very specific flight path. They had to fly 180 miles an hour. That's 3 miles a minute. They had to fly in up 16 miles up and 14 miles across. And as they did the U-turn at the top, they increased their distance one minute longer. So that way they were dropping this window. And knowing the frequency they were dropping their window, that was being picked up by the SeaTac and also the Freya on the northern French coast. So by doing that, that created the impression of a fleet of ships on the water, and each ship would be the equivalent of a ship of about 10,000 tons. That's a pretty damn big ship. So that's what they were doing there. Now that's on the aircraft side. Now to be able to accurately navigate that way, that's where their GH came in. And GH was coming into my squadron just at the end of the war, so I never got to use it myself. But these guys were fully trained on all of that, and consequently they were able to do that. Basically, they were doing formation flying at night. 8 aircraft involved for the Lancasters on 617 Conan, and 8 from the 218 Sterlings. So that they created this mythical fleet moving over the water. Now that's all well and good, but you need something else down below it. So we had that as well. So what we had on the water was the PT boats and MTBs, which were motor torpedo boats, similar things. And they were towing balloons. And these balloons were about 30 feet long, about the same size as a barrage balloon, but inside there were reflectors. Now you can get a reflector on the ground that's made up sort of triangular in shape and conical, it's a difficult thing to describe, but conical in length. And that would reflect as well. So now we have aircraft dropping window, simulating a fleet moving, and we had these boats on the water doing the same speed, 8 knots underneath. And each launch that was towing a balloon, we were towing another launch with another balloon behind it. So you're now getting a massive blips on the German radar screen, and they're moving forward very, very slowly at 8 knots. Now, that was all well and good. Now, another thing that we had at the beginning of the war was a code name called Moonshine, and this was a jamming device that was flown in the Molten Paul Defiant, which was a 2-seat fighter aircraft. Didn't have any forward-firing guns, but had a turret behind the pilot with an air gunner in it. Not a very successful aeroplane, but it was used for jamming. And they would then, any signal coming in from a Freya radar, they could take the signal, amplify it, and send it back. So that way they were getting about 6 or 7 times the amount of information back than they thought they would normally have received. So it worked very, very well. So we had these launches on the ocean, on the English Channel. Now, if you've seen all the videos and movies about D-Day, it was not sort of Lake Placid by any means. It was really quite smooth. The English Channel can be very, very rough indeed. I've still crossed it a couple of times, and if it's a bad day, you could get pretty bad. If you remember the films, a lot of the troops that landing on the Normandy beaches were all sick by the time they got to the beach. We really had to get there because of something solid under their feet. So crossing over with all of this going on through a boat was very effective indeed. The interesting part about it was, if you stand at the water's edge, 6-foot man, you see 3 miles before you hit the horizon. So the ships on the water and the aircraft flying over had to stop at 10 miles. That was at 4 o'clock in the morning. And the reason for that is by 4 o'clock in the morning, the paratroopers were starting to drop in Normandy. So the D-Day invasion was going on. We were monitoring the German frequencies in the discussions on radio, and they were not quite sure which was the actual landing, and they wanted Calais and Boulogne or in the peninsula down at Normandy. So that put Rumsfeld in charge of everything. He delayed two panzer divisions from moving until they could figure out where the actual invasion was. So it was very effective indeed. Of course, by that time, and 2 days later, our boys were pretty well entrenched in northern France. In the meantime, our fleet has moved across the 10 miles to the French coast. And as I mentioned, there were two places. They went from New Haven to Cap de Lantier, I think it was, and the other one was Dover to Calais. That was the Stirlings, the Lancasters, in the longer haul. They stopped at 10 miles, and at that point in time, they started laying smoke screens. All the ships stopped, the boats and everything, and they started playing recordings of anchors being dropped, whistles blowing, all sorts of noises you would expect with a fleet anchoring out at sea, and it worked very, very well. In the meantime, some Lancasters and Halifaxes did a mock raids and dropping paratroopers, real ones, on the area around Caen, CAM, which was a later major battle point in the campaign. But they were SAS types, blowing up stuff and making a general noise everywhere. They also dropped many paratroopers, about big, on parachutes all over the place. So the communications between the Germans got a little bit out of hand. They weren't quite sure what exactly was happening with it. So that was the sort of setup between the whole background to that actual electronic invasion. It worked very, very well indeed, because most of the ships came back, while others stayed there and just kept the plot going with all the noises. And the smoke screen, it was difficult to see. And the weather was not particularly good on D-Day, as you may well remember from the various films that we saw. A lot of cloud there, so it worked incredibly well, and it really tied up an awful lot of panzer troops that could have played havoc with our troops landing in Normandy. Coming back to how it all happened with Joan, she was the, didn't get any kudos from that thing at all, but she and her husband, they had 4 children. The first one, unfortunately, was a girl who had brain damage, and after the war, she and her husband moved to Scotland and formed a foundation, which is still in action today. And she was later given the title of Lady Curran. I'm never sure quite how to pronounce that last name. Anyway, which is quite good. And she lived to be, well, up there, 99, so she did a pretty good job indeed. Her husband was always felt that she never got the recognition that she deserved for what she had done in D-Day, because, and not only that, with the invention of window, it saved a hell of a lot of lives in Bomber Command. So it's a great shame that she never got the famous recognition that a lot of other people did. Anyway, she and her husband did an awful lot of work on that physical handicap thing, and they named a park after her out in Scotland, which is in use today as well. So I'm running out of voice here, so that lasted better than I thought it would. But anyway, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I jumped around because this was a sort of last minute thing to put it all together. I've got a pretty good idea of how it all worked out from the standpoint of security, because this was a complex operation. One of the oddball things that just before D-Day, the Daily Telegraph, which is an English newspaper, one of the crossword puzzles had 3 of the code words for D-Day: Sword Beach, Juno Beach, and Omaha Beach. And there was a mad panic as to what the hell did that get out to the newspapers. It was just an accident of fate that the guy making up the crossword puzzle had popped these names in there. But for no reason at all, nothing to do with D-Day, but it did create quite a stir at the time. The whole thing came together. The technology behind it was quite fascinating to me, and all the equipment and how it all came together to come up with this final pièce de resistance, and it really worked, surprisingly enough. And when you consider the number of people involved, and then nothing leaked out until well after D-Day before any of that came out. Because some of the stuff is still classified, not even today, obviously. Yes?
Thank you for your presentation.
I'll play.
In my limited amount of knowledge, it seems like we have all heard about the inflatable army that was there to deceive, but that's about all we've heard about.
Yeah.
So what you're saying here is that because of the advancement of radar, you are actually able to, and the using of dropping this chaff or window, that you're actually able to make the radar look like there were actually ships moving across the channel and attacking. And that's something I've not heard that before. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really was. It's hard to envisage, but a window, it was about that wide, 6 feet long, and about that thick, very light. And of course it had reflective metal on it. So that gave the reflectivity they needed to follow the radar. And the radar beam could only, at 10 miles, it was about 2.5 miles wide. So from the German radar. And so we were able to make it bigger than that. So they were seeing a bigger thing than actually was there. So it worked very effectively. It's a neat twist.
So the advancement on the top of this screen, you see the advancement of that path made it look like a ship actually moving across the...
Yes, at 8 knots. Anyway, having calculated all that out beforehand to make it all work that way, and then the air crew to be able to do precisely so that everything worked, they were seeing exactly what we wanted them to. And that was exactly how it worked.
What altitude were they flying at to drop the chaff?
That's something I've never been able to find out. I would hazard a guess it would be about 5,000 to 8,000 feet. Because the radar beam, you're not going great distances. It's not like flying over Germany with the radar and the G and the oval. It was limited because of the range, because of the height of the aircraft. Every 1,000 feet you got a mile further. But we're only talking about 18 miles here. Even less than that, because the Dover to Calais is only 22 miles, and if you stop 10 miles, so you've got 12 miles to worry about. So you can calculate out the triangular distance and the height you wanted to fly, and knowing the drop rate of the window. To test it, what they did actually, they took the Freya radar up to Scotland on the northeast coast and set it up there. And then they tested it with the aircraft dropping the window. And they didn't tell the operator what they were going to be doing. And he was plotting a ship on, from the aircraft dropping the window. So when they knew it would work, then getting everybody to do it at exactly the right time was the trick. And the height, I would hazard a guess around 5,000 to 8,000 feet. Because don't forget the weather at that point in time was not particularly good over D-Day. Cloud base, I think, was around about 3 or 4 in certain areas, and squalls. So doing it all, it didn't matter any from the weather standpoint, because you were flying on radar and instruments anyway, so it didn't matter to them. But how high you had to be was dependent on how the slant range of the radar picking it up. I hope. Any others? Or any other topic on it? Yes?
Regarding the shaft for chafe, or whatever you call it, did you say that it had to be specifically that size so that it would match the frequency of the...
Oh yes, absolutely. Well, of course, when knowing the frequency, it's all mathematics from that point on. You know the frequency size, and you cut the wavelength, the reflectivity of it. And we've got some chaff, as it is called now. Of course, now they're different sizes depending on the type of radar you're jamming. But at that time, the window, as it was called, got the code name window, and that worked very, very well indeed. It was the Germans had a similar stuff called Dupel, D-U-P-E-L-L, and they had it. They didn't want to use it either to give us the idea. And of course, we didn't want to use ours to give them the idea, so there was a bit of a stalemate until Fighter Command were happy that our radar would be able to cut through it. You can get around it. I know when I was up chasing, other aircraft and targets, you can off-tune your set a little bit and just be able to see through the window and pick up the guy dropping it. Of course, radar's changed quite a bit since my day, so I don't know what they can do now, but so you're all experts in normal command now. At the meeting next month, I'm hoping to get a hold of one of the pilots from Virgin Galactic. That's the space thing that's done in New Mexico. He's an ex-RAF guy, flew for Virgin, now he's one of their test pilots. And I'm hoping he can get here next month. I'll let you know in the newsletter as to when I find out. At the moment, it looks good, so he can give us an idea of what they're doing down there. I think that it costs about $250,000 for one of the flights. They get up 50 miles up there. So you won't see my name on the list. I might try and compliment to get the oldest man up there, but I doubt if they do that.
Senior discount.
So, anyway, we run a little bit earlier out of time. This, when I first started doing this, I thought, hell, 5-10 minutes will be all over. But when I started digging into it, it became kind of fascinating how all these other things had to tie together to get to that ultimate stage of navigation, to be able to do all the timing with the precision required. And the brains behind it, and people with unknown faces, until I stumbled on little Joan there, Curran, and she's been quite a genius. She and her husband were both physicists, so a happily married team. 58 years, not bad. So, until she passed away. So, no more questions? That's a shame. Yes, sir.
What were the dimensions of the chaff again for this day?
On this one, it was about, it was 6 feet long. It was concertinaed. So, because you can't have 6 long chunks in the airplane, just pack it all up, and when you throw it out, it'll elongate automatically. The depth was about 6 centimeters, and the width was probably about 2 to 3 inches. All mathematical. Yeah.
You flew, correct? Like during the war?
I'm sorry?
I said you flew during the war?
Yes.
What planes did you fly?
I was in the Halifax. It's the same size as the Lancaster. It didn't carry quite as big a bomb load. Only we carried 12,000. The Lanc carried 14. And it was just the case nobody has to handle a patient to make a bigger bomb there. But it never got the credit that the Lancaster did, because the dam buster rays really made it famous. It's rather like the Hurricane shot down more Germans on the Battle of Britain than the Spitfire did, but that all the glamour was with the Spitfire because of its shape. So, but the Halifax was used in all sorts of things. Net flights, they used to fly out over the Atlantic. They'd go down to about 100 feet, then go up to 25,000, up and down like that, taking readings. And that's kind of a dodgy job, because some of the, in the wintertime in the Atlantic, you could get waves of about 100 feet deep. And if you go up to the Queen Mary, they've got pictures there of the ship with the bow practically in the water. So you've got them down. I've sailed on them twice, actually. I was up there with the Red Arrows at the beginning of the month. We tried to get them to fly over here, but the time I saw the guy who was in charge, but the request got there too late for them to do a diversion, because it's all tied in with air traffic control because of the devastating flights that are on here, LAX and Long Beach. So, anyway, that was the Halifax during the war. Then I was on transports in Yorks, which was like a Lancaster with a boxy body on it. Then I switched to mosquitoes and then on to jets. So, the Mossie was the most fun aeroplane I ever flew. To watch what it did, but they only built about 6,000. There's a guy writing a book right now, because apparently there was a batch of mosquitoes didn't get the proper woodwork done on the spar, and the wings came off quite a few of them. It was all hushed up during the war, but the various makes, I flew the 30 and the 36, and the only difference was the engines and the propellers. One would get up to 30,000, the other 36. And the rate of climb was about 3,000 feet a minute. Of course, the jet, they go straight up. There's another expression I won't use, ladies present.
What's the range of the Halifax?
About 1,200 miles, about the same as the Lanc. They had a Lancaster designed when the European war finished to put a big fuel tank on the top of the fuselage behind the cockpit and took out the top turret. And that was going to give it a range to be able to hit Japan from China. Fortunately, it never came to pass, but the V-29s finished all that, which was a great blessing for an awful lot of people. At the end of the war, our group was transferred to Transport Command. That's how I finished up in it. And we were going to fly the hump with the C-47s, and then drop the nukes, and that all finished. And the bit of an airlift started, so I got shot over there for a while, which was a lot of fun. That became a routine. You could land an airplane every 3 minutes and take one off in between. We can't run a bus stop like that. It's unbelievable what they could do. It was a very interesting time because General Christopher May was put in charge of it, and he was a real go-getter for sure. And it was well known from the May that if anybody harassed one of the transport aircraft or shot one down, Moscow would have disappeared within the hour. And the Russians knew it too, because he would have done it. So, when you took off from Gata, you could look down and see the anti-aircraft guns tracking it for practice. Fortunately, nobody fired one, otherwise none of us would be standing here. That would have started World War III in a big way. It was an interesting time in Transport Command because I finished up at the headquarters there. I had basically running my own airline. I could jump on a plane and fly anywhere. And I went all over the planet with it, Middle East, Far East, the whole bit, Africa, the Azores, just about everywhere. It was a lot of fun being paid as well. It was the only way to fly, free, because of my Scottish nature. So, but after that, when I went on to mosquitoes, I thought I didn't want to get back in Bomber Command because that would have been sitting out there for 8 to 10 hours in what was now a Lincoln, a bigger Lancaster. Didn't appeal to me at all. Jet bombers were still a long way off. It didn't come into the 1950s. But the Canberra was the first one like the one we have here, the B-57. And they were pretty impressive. They were 55,000 feet. And that was a long way up in those days, in the mid-50s. The average fighter was good for about 40. And the Mosquito, we could get up to 35, that's about tops. Some Spitfires were getting up to 40,000 with the souped-up engines. They were used for reconnaissance out of Hong Kong over China until they got the MiG-15, and that killed that one. But they were quite effective with a prop engine up to that height. Jets now run around 55, 60 all the time. The Blackbird out there, 85,000.
Did you want to talk about jumping out of your first mission over France?
Not particularly. Yes, it was. Again, Bomber Command operated in a different fashion from the daylight bombing with the B-17s and the 24s. At night time, if you take a block of sky 9 miles long, 3 miles wide, and a mile deep, and you put 1,000 aircraft in there, all flying at different heights, speeds, and directions, the chances of hitting all enough are quite small. If you get them all going in the same direction, your chances drop down to practically nothing. And of course, at night, it's not that bad. The average human being can see about 800 feet on a good night with normal vision, unless you're hungover. But the benefit is you can feel turbulence if you're getting close to somebody else. You've got a top turret gunner, not top turret, but a mid-upper gunner, and a tail gunner at the back end. We don't have a ball turret because you can't see out of it at night. Because too much light reflection, you can't see a thing. So when we were operating B-17s, they took the ball turrets out anyway. They're no good to us. So we then put in some more stuff that we needed. Anyway, at night time, if the main force was attacking one area of Germany, there'd be what we call a spoof force. A sweepstake was the code name for it. And they would be a similar number of, probably about 80 to 100 aircraft, mainly from the training units as a graduation thing. Sometimes they'd use a couple of squadron aircraft if they had a few spares that they could use. They would then go out dropping window, and they'd be heading for a specific target somewhere in Germany, or anywhere in France for that matter, depending where you were heading. And that was our graduation thing, ready to go to the squadron. And off we went. Well, the training aeroplanes are sort of worn out bombers that have seen better days, and they're not too reliable. So anyway, they maintain them as best as they can, obviously. But the casualty rate, only enough about, if you take 100 airmen, about 9 of them would die crashes in training in England of 100 aircrew, which is a pretty high statistic. Anyway, we were briefed to do a trip. The main force were going into northern Germany, and we were pointing our force of about 80, I think it was 80 odd aircraft that night. We're heading for the target area would have been down Stuttgart in southern Germany area. So we were pointing that way as we crossed the channel. Now, you're doing everything just the same as a real bomber operation, start out time, take off time, and so on. The aircraft we'd been assigned to fly that night, one of the engines wouldn't start, so we had to scamper out to another airplane with all our gear, jump aboard and wind it up and get off on time, which is what we did. Anyway, you climb up on a radius of action, you set course over base, so you calculate when you have to leave base, so you fly up and do that sort of climb up to get to your starting point. Then you chug down the middle of England and hit the various landmarks using H2S and radar and so on, and you've got G coverage all the way there practically. So we were chugging off all over France. Paris was not lit up at that time. It was occupied by our people, the Allies. And so we were approaching, went over the bond line. And the bond line was like usually about 20 miles in front of where the army hopefully were still behind it in case anybody was dropping bombs. So that extended pretty far, not too far into Germany at that time. So we'd done all our stuff, we dropped our window just as scheduled, like we're supposed to, and then we were at 18,000 feet. Our flight plan called for us to do a U-turn and head back to homeland, and descend down to 5,000 feet. So we were descending now through cloud all the way down over France, and we'd crossed the bond line, so we were in friendly territory. And of course, once you get below 10,000 feet, get that damn oxygen mask on and start breathing normally, which was all well and good. So I just taken a G-fix at John about 5,000 feet. I plotted the damn thing, and I just happened to glance at the altimeter in the cabin. We had a whole bunch of them there, and I mentioned to the pilot, I said, "Hey, Jeff, the altimeter reading 3,500 feet. There's some hills around here." So he said, "Yeah, I know." And he said, "Well, all the engines have stopped." And that sort of caught my attention real fast. And the next thing he said, "You better bail out." So we all acknowledged it. My parachute was in the nose by the bomb site, so I shot in there, came back through the blackout curtain, and we were still going down. I could feel that the engines were sort of coming on and dying off, and we weren't going to sit there and discuss what the problem was. There had no time left, because the Halifax without power sinks like a lead balloon. So anyway, I came back in, and my buddy said, well, he had both hands on the escape hatch handle, and I couldn't, he's a big guy, he was about 6 feet, and normally what you do, you pull the handle up and turn it 90 degrees and the hatch opens. I didn't know he hadn't turned the damn handle, so he was straining on this thing like a bandit. I could see that we weren't getting anywhere. I couldn't help him because I didn't know he hadn't turned the damn handle. And I meant me standing on the hatch because the hinge was at the front end of the hatch. So we were pulling, yeah. So I lifted his head and I said, looks like we're going out the back tonight. So he nodded his head, he turned around and zoomed off. I didn't see him until the next day. So I followed him along, and as I go past, we didn't carry second pilots. They only have one single pilot, Halifax and Lancaster. So there's a flip-up seat there that I used to sit on as the pilot on takeoff and landing. Anyway, that caught my harness. I had to untie that. So I still got my shoe on, so I had to go over. I had time to look at the instrument panel. The dials were all over the place, and red lights were flashing on and off. So I carried on back past where the engineer used to stand. The wireless operator sat underneath the pilot, so he started to follow me. So I got down to the first main spark, and the engineer was there, and he was fiddling with fuel tank levers. So I stopped, and I thought he might not have heard the order to jump because he'd never shoot there. So I lifted his helmet and said, "You got to jump," and he nodded because by that time the wireless operator was breathing out of my neck. So I fell off the ass end of the bomb bay because it's got a drop about yay big. And I'm a little guy, and that was a big step down because it's black as pitch in there. You can't see a thing, and I've no night vision. I've been working on the lights up at the front end. So anyway, I get down there, and the upper gunner by that time was opening the escape hatch, and he sat down. I gave him a shot, and out he went. I just dived right out after him. I didn't know where the other guys were, but I was able to sit around and have a conference. So out I went, and I sort of curled out as I bailed out there, and I had my hand on the D-ring, and the slipstream pulled that, and I could hear the thing, the ripcord, what do you call it, the shroud lines pouring out with a sort of whirring sound, and there was a jerk, and I must have been falling head first on my back. When the chute opened, I did that, and my boots went upwards, and one of them shot off. So anyway, I was coming down with, I made the mistake of keeping my helmet on. I just plugged the cord lead into my pocket. Anyway, that sort of blinded me for a bit. To pull that up, see what was going on. I was in the cloud, pitch black, I couldn't see anything at all. And I could feel it swinging, so I straightened that up. And the next thing I know, I'm in a tree. And so I wasn't in there more than just a few seconds, really, because you fall at about 120 miles an hour. And of course, when you get out of the airplane, you're going at the same speed as the aircraft was. And we were in that sort of attitude. So I reckon by the time I got to the back end, we were probably down around about 2,500 feet at the most, maybe less. So, and it wasn't all enough, it was hilly country. And I landed in this forest at night with one boot and nothing. I couldn't see the ground, and the dumbest thing I've ever done, because you just turn the buckle and slap it, and your harness falls off because you fall out. Which is what I did, and I fell about 7 feet. So I didn't break anything, but it was really dumb. I could have been at 50 feet in the air for all I knew. So anyway, that was me on the ground. So couldn't do a thing till the sun came up. It was about 3 in the morning, and it was raining. It kind of miserable. And I sat there trying to figure out what the hell happened, and then expecting to hear a loud bang when the aircraft hit, and there was nothing. So I figured, I don't know what. Did I hear something the wrong way or whatever? So come the dawn, I was all set to get up and go. There was some animal running around at night. It must have been a dog because it had a sort of metal sound to it. I don't know what the hell it was because I never saw it. So I went hobbling down the side of the hill. I found a path and then broke out of the forest. And I could hear traffic all night long, but no idea which direction it was coming from, mainly because if a tree falls in the forest, well, believe me, it doesn't matter, you can't hear it either. Anyway, I saw there was a pretty good sized road there, not a freeway by any means, a 2-lane highway, and jeeps on it. I thought, oh, great. I didn't realize then it was Patton's Third Army, but I knew it was behind the lines. So I blew my little dinghy whistle in, the jeep stopped, and there were 2 Frenchmen in it, French soldiers. And I thought, my God, my French with pens on the table didn't like cut the mustard. I had enough French to make them understand I wanted to see the military police. And they didn't know what the hell they'd got, because my RAF uniform looked a little like the German field grey colour. So while they were debating what the hell to do, I just climbed in the jeep and sat down in the back. So it took me into the gendarme Sandizi at the time, it's still there. I dreamed of showed it on a visit there many years ago. And the 6 of the biggest French policemen I've ever seen marched me down the street here with one boot on and got this bloody helmet. The windows are going up and people staring and pointing. It was kind of funny. And they take me into the local American MP, and there's a sergeant sitting at the desk, and I said, I'm RAF officers, can you get me an intelligence officer? I want to find out what the hell happened to my crew. And I said, by the way, can you get me a pair of boots? I've only got one. And he said, what size? I said, 7. Get a lieutenant boots. And said, I got a pair of brand new boots. I couldn't believe it. This is 20 miles behind the front lines. That was the most organised army I've ever seen in my life. Unbelievable. The next thing I knew, I'd been picked up by 2 intelligence officers. So I told them the aircraft and I wondered what the hell we were all about. And I said, I didn't order my crew. I said, how many got out? And I said, what happened to the airplane? I didn't hear it explode. He said, well, we picked up 4 more of your crew. And I thought, 4, that means 2 missing. And so that happened to be the pilot and engineer. And the engines came back on. What they put it down to was carburetor icing. And that was causing them to start and stop. And of course, when you've got low power, you're heading outwards. Anyway, one of them been injured. I thought, oh God, so which one they didn't know. It turned out to be our tail gunner, and he was from Jamaica. Vernon was as black as the ace of spades, and great sense of humour. And he was a big guy, and the reason he was hurt was a freak thing, because in the tail turret in the bombers that we had, the turret doors are about yay far apart. There's 2 of them, so it gives you an opening about that wide. And being from Jamaica, he felt the cold more than anybody, because he'd done the back end, there's no heat down there. So he used to wear a heck of a lot of clothing to stay warm, which was normal. Anyway, he'd almost put the aircraft on service because the door was a bit sticky. He thought, well, if we've had one engine that we started, I think we're all chicken or something, so he decided it would be okay. Unfortunately, it wasn't. So when he got the order to jump, only half the door opened. And that meant he came out through a door about yay big. And in the process, he bent the buckle where you clip your harness, your parachute into the harness. And that's normally held in by your hands look like that. And when you pull the thing, that part, that stays on your body, and that bit goes up with the parachute. And that unfortunately got bent. So when he went out, it fell out, so he clipped it back in. And when he jumped, that came out, and smashed his whole front of his face in. And of course, he came down with only one short line hanging on, so he was landing sideways when he crashed into the trees. I never did find out how he got down to civilization where they picked him up, because I didn't see him until after the war. He was taken to the American hospital, and they thought he was going to croak. There were no 2 ways about it, because he lost a lot of blood. But he survived, thank goodness. And he'd been a medical student. I'm trusting he hold of his chart at the end of the bed. I was quite surprised to see just how bad he'd been hurt. So anyway, he survived the war, and I didn't see him until after the war when he got up to the squadron. And he had 2 bars across here and bolts bolted into the bones. Of course, they would probably have teeth and everything else, but that was the emergency stuff that he had, and he was picked up and he was treated incredibly well by the American medical staff. And of course, I was a bit worried at the time because the American Army had segregation at that time, and it loved the heck out of him. You couldn't say enough things about them. They were really nice. So I was glad to hear that, but we had to get another gun and then start all over again. So that was the way it went. It was sort of an exciting time. So we became a member of the Caterpillar Club, and it was founded by Leslie Irvin. I did a talk on this, about 4 or 5 years ago, I think, on how it all worked. Anyway, Leslie Everton invented the parachute before there were aeroplanes. He was 12 years old. And he built his first parachute. People used to jump out of balloons, but they were chute things trapped in the basket of the balloon. So he built his own balloon, and to make it sort of a live movement thing, he put a tabby cat in there with a parachute on it, and the aim was it would get up high in the balloon, and then they'd pull the string, and that would come the cat. But it didn't work that way. They chased the damn thing, it flew away from him, and it disappeared off towards Catalina, hopefully. And he made a promise he'd never let anybody go up in a parachute unless he tested it himself. And he didn't invent his first parachute till 1922. And we didn't have parachutes in World War I. The Germans had a few coming along. They had them in balloons, so the basket got shot up in the front line as observation. They could bail out, but the parachute was part of the basket. So he'd step out of the basket and the chute would come out of it and shoot down the side of the basket. But his was the first free-wall one. And then when they started, people started jumping out of airplanes on a regular basis. In the early days, in the 20s, they were pretty fragile and bits used to fall off all the time. So they got the idea, first, on the first 2 or 3 jumps, they got the wreckage of the aircraft and photographed the pilot. Beside all this, then when it became a bit more frequent, they couldn't carry airplanes all over the place. So one of the PR people came up with the idea of the caterpillar club, because a caterpillar hangs by a silk thread before it becomes a butterfly that's come down from the larvae. And parachutes were made of silk, hence the name of the Caterpillar Club. And he formed this club. You had to be able to have verified that you did jump by somebody seeing it, or your CO or whatever, writing it up. And you get a card with your name on it. You get a little gold caterpillar with 2 red ruby eyes. It's 14 karat gold. And he'd give one of these free to everybody who jumped. Of course, at the end of the war, when all the POWs came back, it almost broke the company because it promised all these gold caterpillars, and about 10,000 people rolled up looking for the caterpillar. 3 guys jumped without a chute and got away with it in World War II. 1 American and 2 Brits. And it's quite a long story, I won't go into it, but if you look it up on my Caterpillar Club, it gives you the whole outline of how it all came to pass. Anyway, that's used up the hour and a half for free to go. I do appreciate it. I'm sorry it was a little short of it, but it's not one subject, and I stretched it out as much as I could. So I do appreciate you coming. Thank you very much, and have a safe journey home. And hopefully,